This tape was cataloged at 2:17 tomorrow morning. I know how that sounds. I checked the recorder clock, the hotel clock, the network clock on my laptop, and the time signal broadcast from Winnipeg. All four agree that tomorrow has not happened yet. But the voice on this recording has already described this room. It has already repeated 3 sentences I had not spoken when the recording was made. And 37 seconds from now, if the sequence remains unchanged, it will announce my name. My name is Daniel Hale. I was hired to catalog a collection of audio equipment and documents recovered during maintenance work at the Fort Garry Hotel in Winnipeg. What follows is not an official hotel statement. It is not a government recording, and nothing in this account should be mistaken for a verified historical event. The hotel is real. The old radio station was real. The transmission is not supposed to be. There. That music is coming through again. The receiver is not connected to an antenna. The power supply is sitting on the floor beside me, and the speaker cone has been physically removed. Still, I can hear it. Not from the machine this time, from behind the wall. The announcer has reached the final portion of the program. He is reading the departures. Fort Garry service. Final departure. Daniel Hale. Room 202. Transfer incomplete. That was my name. This is the first time I have heard it spoken on the program. It will not be the last. 2:20 a.m. Recovery log. I should begin with the building. The Fort Garry Hotel was constructed between 1911 and 1913 for the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway. It belongs to the era of Canada's Grand Railway hotels, large chateau-style buildings designed to turn railway travel into something elegant, permanent, and national. Fort Garry rises above Broadway Avenue in pale stone, steep roofs and dark dormer windows. In daylight it looks ceremonial. At night, especially in winter, it can look much older than the streets surrounding it. That impression is architectural, not supernatural. I am saying that now because I began this work as a skeptic, and because skepticism is the only part of my original reasoning I still trust. In September 1924, radio station CNRW began broadcasting from the hotel. It was part of the Canadian National Railways radio system, an early network that carried music, news, and entertainment across railway routes. A surviving program guide from July 1929 lists CNRW in Winnipeg at a wavelength of 384.4 meters, approximately 780 kilohertz. The guide advertises dinner programs from the Fort Garry Hotel at 6:30 in the evening. On Sundays, it lists a 9 o'clock musicale. That was the historical material I was brought in to catalog. Not a haunted room, not a missing person case, not a secret broadcast. A box of papers, damaged electrical components, 2 receivers, 1 reel-to-reel machine from the 1960s, and several spools of 1/4-inch tape. The hotel had recovered the materials from a sealed service space, uncovered during electrical work. No one claimed the room had been an original CNRW studio. There was no surviving evidence to prove that. The equipment came from different decades. The receivers were built long after CNRW stopped operating. The tape recorder was manufactured more than 30 years after the station began broadcasting. My first assumption was that someone had collected old radio equipment and stored it there. My job was to identify what could be preserved, photograph the documents, and digitize anything recoverable from the tapes. The sealed service space was on the 2nd floor. It was not inside room 202. It was behind it. That distinction mattered to me for approximately 6 hours. The hotel's room 202 has a reputation. Guests and staff have described unexplained sounds, the impression of someone sitting or lying on a bed, and occasional sightings of a woman. A story is often repeated about a death in the room, but I could not find reliable documentary proof for the version people usually tell. That did not surprise me. Haunted buildings attract stories, and stories simplify themselves as they spread. An unexplained noise becomes a footstep. A shadow becomes a woman. A woman becomes a grieving bride. Eventually, every detail sounds certain because no one remembers who first said it. I expected the service space to contain something equally ordinary. Old pipes, loose wiring, perhaps an elevator mechanism transferring vibration through the masonry. For the first 3 hours, that was exactly what I found. The room was narrow and unfinished, with stone on one side and layers of later wallboard on the other. A vertical bundle of cloth-insulated wire ran through a ceramic junction block near the floor. Most of the wires had been cut. 2 continued upward behind the wall, separating the service space from room 202. Someone had attached a small metal tag to the pair. The marking on it was simple: R202. The tag was not old enough to be original. I estimated late 1950s or early 1960s. It probably indicated a room circuit. I photographed it, wrote down the number, and moved on. At 6:27 that evening, I connected one of the recovered receivers to a current limited bench supply. The chassis was dusty but largely intact. Its dial was marked in kilocycles, the older term for what we now call kilohertz. I did not expect it to function. At 6:30 precisely, the tuning indicator brightened. A carrier appeared near 780. Then music came through. It was faint, narrow, and unstable, but unmistakable. A small orchestra, strings, piano, and what might have been clarinet. I assumed the receiver was picking up a modern station through image frequency interference. Old radios are not selective by modern standards. A strong local signal can appear where it does not belong. I recorded 30 seconds and began turning the dial. The music remained. I lowered the frequency. It remained. I raised it. It remained. I turned the receiver off. The music continued for another 11 seconds. Then a male announcer spoke. His delivery was measured and formal, consistent with recordings from early commercial radio. There was no artificial ghostly distortion, no backward speech, no theatrical whispering. He gave the call sign CNRW. He identified the program as originating from the Fort Garry Hotel. Then he welcomed the evening's guests. The first name was Margaret Bell. The second was Edwin Clay. The third was Miriam Voss. After each name, the announcer stated a time: 6:40 a.m., 9:15 a.m., 11:12 a.m. I wrote the names down because I assumed they belonged to performers. When I checked the 1929 program guide, none appeared. When I checked available historical newspaper listings, I found nothing. I did not have access to the hotel's current guest information, and I did not ask for it. At that point, there was no reason to. The program lasted 13 minutes. Most of it was music. Near the end, the announcer repeated the 3 names. This time he added a phrase before each one: final departure. At 6:43 the next morning, I learned that Margaret Bell had been staying in the hotel. She had left shortly after 6 to catch an early train. She collapsed in the enclosed walkway near Union Station. Emergency services arrived quickly, but she could not be revived. The time recorded in the fictional incident report later provided to me was 6:40 a.m. The first name on the program, the first departure. I need to emphasize something before continuing. Margaret Bell is not the name of a real guest. The death described in this story did not occur, but within the recording you are hearing, I believed that it had. And from that moment forward, I stopped treating the transmission as harmless interference. 7:05 a.m., first verification. Coincidence remains coincidence, even when it feels cruel. That was the principle I used. Margaret Bell was not an unusual name. A matching time could result from mistaken reporting, an inaccurate clock, or my own memory. I retrieved the digital recording. Its creation time was 6:24 p.m. That was 6 minutes before I remembered hearing the program begin. Metadata can be wrong. The recorder clock could have drifted. I checked it against my laptop. It was accurate to within 2 seconds. I then examined the waveform, At the beginning of the recording, before the orchestral music became audible, there were 6 soft impacts. They had a regular interval: 2 short, 1 long, 2 short, 1 long. At first I interpreted them as handling noise. When I played them through headphones, I heard something behind each impact. A bell, not an electrical tone, a physical bell with a short metallic decay. The hotel elevator outside the service corridor used a similar chime. I opened the corridor camera log. I was permitted to inspect only the relevant time and only the section covering the empty service hallway. At 6:24, the elevator arrived at the 2nd floor. Its doors opened. No one exited. The doors remained open for 9 seconds. Then they closed. The camera had no sound, but the indicator above the elevator flashed in the same rhythm as the impacts on my recording. 2 short, 1 long. 2 short, 1 long. The recording had captured the elevator 6 minutes before I connected the recovered receiver. That was the first contradiction I could not explain with radio interference. The second came from Edwin Clay. The hotel confirmed that a guest with that fictional name had checked out during the night after hearing about Margaret Bell. He left shortly before 8 a.m. The program had assigned his departure to 9:15. At 9:15, nothing happened to him. He did not collapse. No accident was reported. His phone remained active. For several hours, that seemed important. It suggested the first time had been a coincidence. At 12:30, hotel staff attempted to review his booking record. The record was gone. Not canceled, not deleted in the usual way. Gone. The room he had occupied showed no reservation for the previous night. Payment authorization did not appear in the local system. His scanned identification was absent. The paper registration card was still at the front desk, but it was blank except for the clerk's initials. The staff remembered him. I remembered seeing his name on the transmission notes. His family could still contact him. But the hotel's systems behaved as though Edwin Clay had never arrived. At first, I thought someone had deliberately altered the booking system. Then I checked my handwritten notes. The name Edwin Clay had disappeared. There was still a second line between Margaret Bell and Miriam Voss. I could see the pressure left by my pen, but the ink itself was missing. On the digital recording, the announcer no longer said the name. There was a 2-second patch of music where it had been. The departure at 9:15 had not killed Edwin Clay. It had removed his arrival. That was when the wording began to trouble me. The announcer had never said anyone would die. He had said final departure. I had supplied the rest. 11:40 a.m., the third name. Miriam Voss was not registered at the hotel when I first searched. I was able to verify that without accessing private information, because no one at the desk recognized the name. At 11:12 a.m., the time announced during the program, the hotel received an online reservation under that name. The booking was for room 202. It had been placed 8 minutes earlier, but network delay held it before delivery. Miriam Voss had not yet arrived. The program had announced her before she became a guest. Her reservation included a note requesting a quiet room away from elevators. It contained no mention of room 202. The booking system had assigned the room automatically. Hotel staff moved the reservation to another floor. Within seconds, it returned to 202. They moved it again. The system returned it again. The reservation was then canceled. At 11:38, the booking reappeared with a new status. Checked in. No one had entered the room. The electronic lock log showed no keycard access. The housekeeping record showed the room had been inspected and empty. But the room telephone placed a 12-second call to the hotel's internal service number. The call contained no voice, only music. The same orchestral program I had recorded the previous evening. I inspected room 202 shortly after noon. I did not go alone, but no second voice appears in this record. I am preserving the single account because every other recorded voice from that day eventually changed. The room looked ordinary. The bed was made, curtains open, daylight across the carpet. The wardrobe stood against the wall shared with the narrow service space. Behind it, beneath multiple coats of paint, we found a circular brass plate. The plate had no visible screws. Stamped at its center was the number 202. Below the number were two letters, R and P. I initially read them as return pair, an old telephone or audio circuit designation. Later, I would find a different meaning. I placed an induction probe near the plate. The probe detected a low-frequency signal inside the wall. It was not speech. It was a repeating pulse. Two short, one long. Two short, one long. The elevator pattern. I moved the probe away. The signal weakened. At the center of the room, it disappeared. At the foot of the bed, it returned. That location mattered because accounts associated with the room often described a figure near the bed or the feeling that someone had disturbed the mattress. I saw no figure. I heard no footsteps. But when the pulse began again, the bedspread tightened. Not dramatically. The surface drew downward by less than an inch, as though air pressure had changed above it. Then the impression moved from the foot of the bed toward the pillow, slowly, one measured interval at a time. Two short, one long. Two short, one long. I did not interpret it as a person climbing onto the bed. It looked more like a line being scanned. When the movement reached the pillow, the room telephone rang. The cable had been disconnected. The handset was not attached to the wall. It rang once anyway. Then the radio program began at 12 o'clock noon. Not 6:30. Not the historical schedule. Noon. The announcer welcomed Miriam Voss to the Fort Garry Hotel. He stated that her arrival had been accepted. Then he added one new phrase: transfer awaiting occupancy. The signal ended. At 12:07, the room's booking status changed again. Miriam Voss was no longer checked in. The status field contained two letters, RP. That was the marking on the brass plate. I searched archived railway terminology, telephone schematics, and radio engineering references. Return pair remained the most practical explanation. But inside one undated maintenance notebook from the recovered box, I found those initials used differently. The notebook was not from 1929. The paper and binding appeared several decades newer. Most pages documented routine electrical repairs. Near the back, one sheet contained a hand-drawn diagram of the second floor. A line ran through the service space, behind room 202, and down toward the hotel's older communications conduits. At the end of the line were the letters RP. Underneath, someone had written, receiving platform. That was not a real engineering term. Not for a hotel. Not for a radio station. But after that entry, the word room did not appear anywhere in the notebook. The writer called 202 a platform. 3:30 p.m. Equipment isolation. By mid-afternoon, I had constructed the least supernatural explanation available. Someone had built a hidden transmitter into the wall. The guest names had been obtained through unauthorized access to hotel systems. The booking irregularities were part of the same intrusion. The physical movement on the bed could have been produced by airflow, concealed mechanism, or my own unreliable perception. The digital recording timestamp could have been altered. The disappearance of ink from my notes was more difficult, but paper could be replaced. The program was an elaborate hoax. That explanation required coordination, money, and access. It was improbable, but it was still more probable than a radio broadcast traveling backward through time. I began isolation testing. First, power to the second-floor service circuit was cut. The carrier remained. Then power to the entire floor was cut briefly under maintenance supervision. The carrier remained. I disconnected every recoverable wire from the ceramic block. The carrier weakened by less than 1 decibel. I wrapped the receiver in radio frequency shielding. The signal became clearer. I removed the receiver completely and placed a battery-powered field recorder inside the shielded enclosure. The recorder captured the program. I removed the microphone from the recorder and repeated the test. It captured the program again. That should not have happened. A digital recorder with no microphone cannot record airborne sound. If its input is terminated and its circuitry shielded, only internal noise should remain. Yet the waveform contained music. More importantly, the static was different in every recording, while the music and announcer remained sample for sample identical. If these recordings came from the same broadcast, the static should have been similar. If they came from playback of the same digital file, the static should have been identical. Instead, every machine generated its own unique noise around a shared signal. The program did not seem to be traveling through the air. It was appearing beneath whatever noise the device naturally produced. I tested blank sections of the recovered tape. Music appeared under the tape hiss. I tested an unused memory card. The program appeared beneath the digital noise floor. I opened a new audio project on my laptop and recorded 10 seconds from a disabled input. The announcer's breath appeared in the file. Not his voice. Only the small intake of air before speaking. I deleted the file. It returned in the project folder with a creation date of the following morning. I deleted it again. A second version appeared. The new file was 7 seconds longer. At its end, I heard myself moving a chair. Then I heard myself say, I deleted it again. I had not yet spoken those words aloud. I sat motionless for almost a minute. The recording continued. My future voice did not. I thought I had broken the sequence by refusing to speak. Then the file updated. The sentence disappeared. In its place, the announcer said, "Delay acknowledged." That was the first evidence that the program was not simply replaying a fixed future. It was monitoring deviations. It had a schedule, but it could revise it. 6:15 p.m., second program. I considered leaving before the historical 6:30 broadcast time. I should have left. Instead, I remained because I believed the scheduled program would provide a controlled test. That is how technical people make dangerous decisions. We mistake repeatability for safety. At 6:15, I placed synchronized recorders in 4 locations. One in the service space, one in room 202, one in an empty ballroom, one in my vehicle across the street. None was connected to the hotel network. At 6:29, the hotel elevators stopped on the second floor. No fault appeared in their control system. Each car simply returned to level 2 and opened its doors. At 6:30, the program began. All 4 recorders captured it. The version in the ballroom contained more room echo, although no sound had been audible there. The version in my vehicle contained road noise beneath the music. The version in room 202 had no static at all. It was clear enough to identify individual instruments: piano, 2 violins, cello, clarinet, a soft percussion brush. There was also a 6th rhythmic element that I had previously assumed belonged to the orchestra, a railway wheel passing over track joints. The pattern repeated every 4 seconds, faster than a train leaving a station, too slow for a train at speed. When I adjusted playback, the interval matched the elevator signal. Too short, 1 long. Too short, 1 long. The announcer introduced the program as a dinner musicale. He thanked listeners aboard Canadian national trains. Then his wording changed. He welcomed listeners aboard the Fort Garry service. He said the service would be operating without geographic restriction. He said all arrivals would be reconciled against final departures. He announced 5 names. 3 belonged to fictional hotel guests. 1 belonged to a staff member. The 5th was mine. No times were given. Instead, each name received a status: proceeding, delayed, unaccounted, carried forward, held at station. My status was held at station. The staff member's status was carried forward. At 6:38, that person walked out of the hotel and crossed Broadway Avenue. Nothing happened. At 6:42, their image disappeared from the second-floor security recording. They remained visible on the first floor. They remained visible outside. Only the second-floor footage changed. The recording now showed the elevator opening by itself. No person emerged. In the hotel's shift schedule, the staff member's name moved from the current date to the same date in 1929. I do not mean the computer displayed the wrong year. A printed shift sheet stored inside the archive box now included that person's name. The paper appeared old. The ink did not. I photographed it. In the photograph, the name was absent. I looked back at the page. It was still there. Some forms of evidence survived only while observed directly. Others survived only through machines. The program seemed to understand the difference. That was when I began to suspect the Anomaly was not using radio as a channel. Radio was its format. The distinction is important. A signal travels from a transmitter to a receiver. A format is a set of rules used to organize information. Call sign, introduction, program, station identification, sign-off. The Anomaly did not need a functioning transmitter because it was not sending energy across a physical distance. It was arranging noise into the form of a broadcast wherever the program could be recorded. Tape hiss, electrical noise, room ambience, road sound. Any uncertainty large enough to hide a pattern became a carrier. The quieter we made the equipment, the clearer it became. The program was not fighting interference. It required interference. It needed something uncertain to organize. I looked again at the 1929 schedule. CNRW dinner program at 6:30. Sunday musicale at 9. Western Network program at 11. The times created a sequence: 6:30, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I compared them with the departure times from the first broadcast: 6:40, 9:15, 11:12. Each departure occurred slightly after a scheduled program point: 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 12 minutes. The delays looked random until I converted the names to their positions in the guest ledger. Then they became transmission delays. The program was not predicting when people would die. It was measuring how long they took to disappear after being announced. 9 o'clock p.m., the Sunday musicale. It was not Sunday. The program began anyway. At precisely 9, music appeared through every phone speaker on the second floor. The devices did not show an active call or audio application. Volume controls had no effect. Phones set to silent played it at the same soft level. Guests were moved away from the corridor. Room 202 was locked and taken out of service. The door still opened at 9:02. Not violently. The latch withdrew. The handle turned. The door moved inward several inches. From the service space, I could see darkness inside the room. The lights had been left on. The curtains had been left open. Neither detail was visible through the doorway. Only darkness. The program continued. This version contained no announcer for the first 4 minutes. The orchestra played the same melody, but each repetition lost a note. First the clarinet stopped, then the cello, then one violin, then the piano. By the final repetition, only the railway rhythm remained. 2 short, 1 long, 2 short, 1 long. At 9:06, the announcer returned. His voice sounded younger. The tone and cadence were similar, but the recording quality had changed. The frequency range was wider. There was less surface noise. I ran a voice comparison against the earlier program. The underlying vocal pattern matched at 98%. It was not merely the same speaker. It was the same recording reconstructed at a different age. The announcer read a date, July 23, 1929. Then July 23, 2026. Then July 23, 2123. He did not describe them as separate dates. He read them as stops on the same service. The first was origin. The second was receiving platform. The third was terminus. That gave me a possible explanation for RP. Not return pair. Not room 202. Receiving platform. The date in 2026 was 97 years after the program guide. The terminus was 97 years after that. The interval was the same. The program was not traveling one day backward. It was operating on a much larger timetable, with smaller 24-hour corrections inside it. The names announced during the nightly broadcasts were not selected because the people were about to die. They were selected because something about them failed to align between the dates. A person could be present in 2026 but absent from whatever record existed in 2123. The program reconciled that difference. Preceding meant the person remained consistent. Delayed meant the person existed but at the wrong time. Unaccounted meant the system could not locate a future record. Carried forward meant the person had been inserted into an earlier record. Final departure meant there was no continuing version of that person beyond the announced time. Held at station meant something worse. I did not yet know what. At 9:09, the announcer read the guest list for room 202. There were 97 names, one for each year, between 1929 and 2026. Most were unfamiliar. Some may have been invented by the program. Several repeated at irregular intervals. The final name was Miriam Voss. Her status was awaiting occupancy. Then the announcer read one additional name, Daniel Hale. He identified me not as a guest but as an operator. That word changed the nature of my fear. Until then, I believed I had been selected because I was in the room. The program suggested I was there because it required someone to run it. 9:20 p.m. The ledger. The recovered archive box contained a hotel ledger fragment. It did not belong to any official collection. No chain of custody could be established. The pages had been cut from a larger volume, and the dates on them ranged from 1927 to 1931. Most entries were ordinary names, room numbers, and brief account marks. Room 202 appeared frequently. Nothing about the entries suggested death or disappearance. When I inspected the ledger after the 9 o'clock program, a new column had appeared near the binding. I say appeared because it was not visible in my earlier photographs. The column contained single-letter codes: P, D, U, C, H, preceding, delayed, unaccounted, carried forward, held, every status used by the broadcast. The codes beside most historical names were P. A small number were D or U. Only one historical entry had an H. The guest name beside it had been scraped away. Under magnification, the damaged paper retained shallow impressions from the original handwriting. I traced them digitally. The first name appeared to begin with D. The surname had 4 letters. I will not pretend that the result was definitive, but the pattern resembled my name, Daniel Hale. On a page dated 1929, I checked the paper under alternate light. A second inscription became visible beneath the first. It was written in smaller letters. Operator received before transmission. The sentence made no engineering sense. A receiver receives after a transmitter sends. That order defines communication. But if the program existed as a reconciliation between records rather than a signal traveling through time, normal transmission order might not apply. The system could receive a person before that person produced the program. It could record my voice before I spoke. It could list my name before I was born. The broadcast might not be predicting me. It might be assembling me from the records I left behind. My reports, my audio tests, my repeated station identifications. Every sentence spoken into the recorder gave it more samples. That explained why the announcer's voice had become younger and clearer. It was not restoring an old voice. It was moving toward mine. I compared the 9 o'clock announcer with my own voice. The match was 61%. Too high for strangers. Too low for a direct copy. I isolated specific sounds. The way the speaker formed the letter R matched me. The pause before numbers matched me. The breath taken before a long sentence matched the file recorded on my laptop. The program was learning how I spoke. I stopped narrating my tests aloud. I switched to handwritten notes. Within minutes, the ink began fading from the paper. I used a mechanical typewriter recovered from storage. The typed letters remained, but some words changed. Transmitter became operator. Room became platform. Guest became passenger. Death became departure. I typed one question. What is held at station? The paper remained unchanged for almost a minute. Then the typewriter ribbon moved without a key being pressed. One word appeared. Announcer. That answer is why I continued recording. Silence would not stop the program. It would only allow the program to speak with my voice, uncontested. 11 o'clock p.m. Western Network program. At 11, the historical guide listed a Western Network program from the studio of CNRW. The Anomaly followed the schedule, but this time it did not remain inside the hotel. Receivers in my equipment cases activated. A parked vehicle radio switched itself on. A weather band scanner produced the same carrier. Online audio streams I had opened for comparison developed identical gaps in their noise. The program was not transmitted nationally. There is no evidence that the public heard it. Its network consisted of devices I had used during the investigation. Every recorder, receiver, and speaker I had exposed became a station. That was my error. The anomaly did not spread through electrical connection. It spread through comparison. Each time I recorded the signal on another device, I taught the program that the device belonged to its network. Each synchronized test acted like a station handoff. Each attempt to prove the signal impossible gave it another place to appear. At 11:03, every exposed device played the same station identification. CNRW, Fort Garry Service, Western Network, Receiving Platform 202. The announcer's voice now matched mine at 84%. It read a list of locations, not cities. Rooms, the service space, the ballroom, my vehicle, the archive desk, room 202. After each location, the program announced whether an operator was present. All were empty except the archive desk. That was where I was sitting. The program then announced a handoff. The carrier shifted from the receiver to my field recorder, then to my laptop, then to the hotel telephone, then into the room itself. I could hear my own station identification moving around me without crossing the distance between devices. There was no audible transition. One word came from the recorder. The next came from the wall. The next came from the unplugged telephone handset. The final word sounded from directly behind my chair. I did not turn immediately. I watched the reflection in the black laptop screen. The room behind me looked empty, but the door to the service corridor was open. I had closed it. Beyond the door, the elevator waited with its doors apart. The indicator did not show the second floor. It displayed 202. An elevator in that building has no 202nd floor. The program announced boarding. The lights inside the elevator shut off. Something moved across the threshold. Not a person, not a shadow. A narrow vertical area in which the image seemed delayed. The corridor remained still, but that strip continued showing the door as it had looked a second earlier. It moved like a reflection carried on an invisible surface. When it reached the service room doorway, the program stopped. The delayed image remained. Inside it, the room was empty. My chair was empty. The recorder sat on the desk by itself. The tape reels were moving. I was looking at the room 1 second after I had vanished from it. Then the delayed image caught up. I was still in the chair. The program resumed. My status changed from held at station to transfer in progress. 11:18 p.m., false stabilization. I disrupted every pattern I could identify. I changed the recorder sample rates. I desynchronized the clocks. I removed batteries. I covered reflective surfaces. I stopped checking the historical schedule. For 22 minutes, the program weakened. At 11:40, the carrier disappeared completely. The room returned to ordinary silence. The elevator indicator showed 2. The booking system showed room 202 unoccupied. The archive ledger returned to its original form. My name vanished from the 1929 page. The future created files disappeared from my laptop. Even the R202 tag on the wire pair looked ordinary again. I believed the anomaly required synchronization. I thought the historical program times, multiple recording devices, and my comparisons had allowed it to stabilize. By destroying that alignment, I believed I had closed the receiving platform. I began packing. At 11:47, I found a new recording on the field recorder. Its duration was 22 minutes, the exact length of the silence. I played it. At first, it contained nothing but room tone. Then I heard myself packing equipment. The sounds occurred at the correct moments. A case closing, a cable placed on the desk, a chair moving. The recording documented the room during the period when the recorder had no battery. At the end, my voice spoke. It said that synchronization had never been required. Observation was sufficient. I had not said that. The recording continued in my voice. It explained that silence was not an absence of program. Silence was a program with no announced passenger. The network had not closed. It had stopped identifying itself because the transfer was already underway. Then the future voice described what I would see when I looked at the archive box. I tried not to look. For almost a minute, I kept my eyes on the recorder. But refusing to verify the statement became its own form of observation. I knew the box was beside me. I knew the ledger was inside. I imagined the page. That was enough. The lid opened. The ledger turned to the 1929 entry. A new line appeared beneath my name. Voice received. Body delayed. I understood held at station. The system had already accepted my recorded identity. My physical presence had not yet followed. I was being held between arrival and departure because the program had received one version of me before the other. The more I recorded, the more complete the transmitted version became. If I continued, it could finish reconstructing my voice. If I stopped, it might preserve only the incomplete copy. Neither possibility returned me to the person who entered the hotel. 12 o'clock midnight, room 202. At midnight, the telephone in room 202 rang. I heard it through the wall. 1 ring, pause, 2 rings, pause, 1 long ring. The same pattern again. I entered the corridor. The door to room 202 stood open. The room beyond it had returned to normal. Lights on, curtains open, bed undisturbed. The brass plate behind the wardrobe was visible even though we had replaced the furniture. Its surface was warm. I placed my hand against it. The orchestral music stopped throughout the network. For the first time, the program responded to direct physical contact. The metal vibrated beneath my palm, not like a speaker, like a rail under a distant train. The vibration strengthened until I could distinguish multiple rhythms inside it. Different speeds, different intervals, many services moving at once. I realized the Fort Garry program was only one route. The system was larger than the hotel, larger than CNRW. Radio had not created it. The railway had not created it. They had provided a language the Anomaly could use. Routes, schedules, arrivals, departures, connections, networks. Human beings had built systems to move bodies across geography and signals across distance. Somewhere inside the overlap, something had begun applying the same rules to time. Perhaps there was no intelligence behind it. A railway timetable does not hate a passenger who misses a connection. A radio schedule does not mourn a listener who tunes in too late. The system may have been equally indifferent. It found discrepancies between one date and another. Then it reconciled them. Room 202 was not haunted by a woman. That did not prove no guest had ever seen one. It suggested something more disturbing. A figure beside the bed could be a passenger displayed before arrival. The impression of someone lying down could be a body delayed from another date. The unexplained sounds could be fragments of a program assembling itself from room noise. The folklore might describe different symptoms of the same scheduling error. Not a dead person remaining in the room, a living person reaching it at the wrong time. The phone rang again. This time I answered. No second speaker carried the call. I heard only my own breathing, delayed by 97 seconds. I held the receiver without speaking. After the delay, the sound of my breathing returned. Then footsteps. I was standing still. The delayed recording contained footsteps approaching the telephone, a chair moving, a page turning. My future voice began reading the opening of this account. This tape was cataloged at 2:17 tomorrow morning. I ended the call. The voice continued through the brass plate. It had reached the section describing the 4 clocks. It was following the same words I am speaking now. Not approximately. Exactly. The program had obtained the finished recording. The full account already existed somewhere ahead of me. That meant every decision I believed I was making freely had already become part of the archive. But the earlier recording had changed when I refused to repeat a sentence. The schedule could revise itself. I still had choices. The problem was that the system treated those choices as delays, not escapes. 12:28 a.m., the first attempt to leave. I packed one recorder and walked toward the elevator. The corridor appeared normal until I passed room 202. The carpet pattern repeated. I continued walking. After 20 steps, I passed room 202 again. I turned around. The elevator was the same distance behind me. The corridor had not visibly lengthened. No door moved. There was no transition. Space had been scheduled like the program. Every route from the service room returned to the receiving platform. I tried the stairs. I descended one flight and opened the door. Room 202 was in front of me. I returned to the stairwell and climbed. After 3 flights, I opened another door. Room 202. The building was not physically changing. My position in it was being reassigned. I was held at station. The program began using the hotel public address speakers, although the system was inactive. My voice announced that Fort Garry service was delayed. It advised passengers to remain available for transfer. It sounded calm, more controlled than I felt. The voice was almost complete. I tested it by speaking an unexpected sequence of numbers. 7, 19, 4, 83. The program repeated them 97 seconds later. Then it added a 5th number, 202. I changed the sequence. It adapted. I whispered, It lowered its volume. I stopped halfway through a word. It completed the word incorrectly, then corrected itself on the next speaker. The copy was not perfect. That imperfection was the only advantage I had. The program could reconstruct my habitual language, but it could not fully predict a choice without recording it first. I needed to create a contradiction it could not reconcile. A departure with no arrival. A message with no speaker. A recording no one had made. Then I remembered the blank tape. The reel-to-reel machine recovered from the sealed service room contained one spool labeled July 23, no year. The tape appeared unused when I first inspected it. It carried only low-level hiss. But we had learned that hiss was enough. I returned to the archive room. The reel was already mounted. The machine was unplugged. The tape moved anyway. 1:00 a.m., the blank program. I placed headphones over my ears. The tape hiss contained the dinner orchestra. Beneath the music was my voice. It was not narrating this account. It was reading names. Margaret Bell, Edwin Clay, Miriam Voss, the fictional guests from the first program. After each name, my recorded voice announced a status. Margaret Bell, final departure. Edwin Clay, delayed. Miriam Voss, awaiting occupancy. Then came 94 additional names. The 97 passengers associated with room 202, one for each year between 1929 and 2026. I recognized none until the final section. The last names belonged to people connected to the investigation. The fictional staff member carried into the old schedule. The technicians who recovered the box. The person who assigned me the job. And me. The program was not cataloging hotel guests. It was cataloging witnesses. Anyone who helped establish the transmission as an event became part of its schedule. Observation created a station. Documentation created a route. Memory created a passenger record. That was why evidence behaved inconsistently. A name could disappear from a digital system while remaining in human memory. The program used whichever record allowed the route to continue. If every record disappeared, the passenger had made a final departure. If the memory remained but the document changed, the passenger was delayed. If a record appeared before the person, the passenger was awaiting occupancy. If the record moved backward, they were carried forward. If a voice arrived before the body, they were held at station. I had spent the entire day increasing the number of records connected to the program. I had not been investigating it. I had been building its timetable. The blank tape reached my name. My copied voice paused. Then it announced, "Operator transfer at 2:17 a.m." That gave me 77 minutes. I rewound the tape. The machine resisted. Not physically. The reel turned normally, but the audio did not move backward. No matter where I placed the tape, playback resumed from the same point. I cut the tape. The machine continued playing through the separated ends. I removed the reel. The empty spindle turned. The program came from the motor. I disconnected the motor assembly. The program came from the table. I stepped away. The program moved into the room tone. A ventilation fan. A water pipe. Distant traffic. Every uncertain sound carried a fragment of my voice. Destroying equipment would not stop it. The program now knew the room itself as a recording medium. 1:22 a.m. Archive mismatch. I returned to the historical program guide. Until then, I had treated it as a fixed source, a real document proving when CNRW broadcasts occurred. The published schedule still listed the Fort Garry dinner programs and Sunday musicales. But a line had appeared beneath the July 23 entry. The typeface matched the surrounding print. The ink appeared equally aged. The new line listed a program at 2:17 a.m. No station call sign. No wavelength. Only a title. Final departures from receiving platform 202. I checked the digital scan I had downloaded before arriving at the hotel. The line was not present. I refreshed the file. It appeared. I opened another archived copy. It appeared there as well. The program was no longer confined to local evidence. Because I had compared the hotel documents with external archives, the network had acquired those records as stations. I disconnected the internet. The line remained. I shut the laptop. The title appeared faintly on the black screen as reflected letters behind me. I turned. The archive wall was blank. The reflection was not showing the room. It showed room 202. The bed was occupied. A person lay beneath the covers, facing away. Only the back of the head was visible. Short, dark hair. The same length and color as mine. I did not enter the room. I watched through the laptop reflection. The figure shifted. One arm moved from beneath the blanket and reached toward the bedside telephone. At the same moment, the telephone beside me rang. I did not answer. The figure in the reflection lifted the handset anyway. My voice came from the disconnected telephone. It read the current time. 1:26 a.m. Then it described me standing at the archive desk. It described my hand against the laptop lid. It described the fact that I was refusing to look directly at room 202. The copy was now observing me from inside the future room. The program did not need my narration anymore. It had a viewpoint. I closed the laptop completely. The voice continued. It said the operator had arrived. The body remained delayed. Transfer would proceed at 2:17, 1:35 a.m., breaking the schedule. I had 42 minutes. The first useful fact was that the program required records to reconcile. The second was that it recognized delay. The third was that it corrected deviations rather than erasing them immediately. That suggested the system preserved contradictory information long enough to classify it. If I could create two equally valid final records, perhaps it could not decide which version of me to transfer. I prepared two recordings. On the first, I stated that I would enter room 202 at 2:17. On the second, I stated that I would leave the hotel before 2:17. I synchronized them to begin simultaneously. The program absorbed both. For 5 seconds, every carrier in the room split into two tones. The elevator indicator alternated between 2 and the lobby. The corridor stretched in both directions. My status on the ledger flickered between held and delayed. Then the system resolved the contradiction. Both recordings changed. Each now stated that I would remain at the receiving platform. The program could overwrite planned actions because plans were not events. I needed records of outcomes, but only one outcome could occur, unless the voice and body were already treated as separate passengers. The ledger said, voice received, body delayed. The program had divided me. That division could be used. I placed the field recorder inside room 202 and returned to the service space. I routed its monitoring output nowhere. No cable connected the rooms. Then I spoke into a different recorder. I identified myself as Daniel Hale, physical operator, service space. On the recorder in room 202, my copied voice identified itself as Daniel Hale, received operator. Two valid identities. Two locations. One name. The program hesitated. The orchestra lost tempo. The railway rhythm separated from the music. For the first time, the announcer misread the timetable. It called my name twice. One status was proceeding. The other was final departure. I did not know which belonged to me. At 1:42, the room 202 door slammed. All sound stopped. The ledger displayed a new code beside my name, X. The notebook did not define it. The program guide did. A small mark beside canceled broadcasts used the same symbol. Canceled. I had not escaped, but I had forced the system to treat one version of me as a canceled program. The problem was determining which version. I spoke my name. My voice sounded normal. The recording played it back. The first syllable was missing. I tried again. More of the name disappeared. By the fourth attempt, the recorder captured silence where my name should have been. The copy inside room 202 had taken ownership of it. In the ledger, the letters of Daniel Hale began fading beside the body entry. They remained beside the received operator. The program had chosen the voice. I was the canceled version. 1:50 a.m., final account. If the body entry is canceled at 2:17, I do not know what will happen. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps I will leave the hotel and discover that no record of me remains. Perhaps I will continue physically while the program keeps my name, my voice, and every proof that I existed. Edwin Clay may have experienced a lesser version of that. He survived, but his arrival disappeared. The system may not kill people. It may remove the records that allow their presence to remain connected across time. A person without an arrival still has a body. A person without a future record may still be alive. But if every route into and out of that life is removed, I do not know what remains. I am making this final account for a reason. The program turns documentation into infrastructure. That means this recording is dangerous. Listening may qualify as observation. Preserving it may create another station. But destroying it may remove the last record associated with the canceled version of me. I cannot tell you to keep it. I cannot tell you to erase it. I can only describe the choice accurately. At 1:54, the program resumed in room 202. The announcer now uses my voice perfectly. No flutter. No restricted frequency range. No difference in breath or cadence. When it says CNRW, it sounds exactly like me. It is reading a weather report for Winnipeg. The temperature is wrong. The report describes weather 97 years from now. It says the sky is clear. It says the rail lines are silent. It says no occupied structures remain within receiving range. It says Fort Garry service continues without passengers. That may be invention. It may be a future record. It may be the program's attempt to create the future required by its schedule. This is the largest implication, and the one I resisted longest. We assumed the transmission reflected events. What if the events are being altered to match the transmission? Margaret Bell's departure occurred because the time had been announced. Edwin Clay's arrival vanished because he left before his scheduled departure. Miriam Voss's booking appeared because the program required an awaiting passenger. The system may not be reconciling a fixed future. It may be constructing one from the records available to it. A timetable does not simply describe where a train will be. Once an entire network follows it, the timetable determines where every train must go. At 1:58, the hotel clocks moved forward 1 minute. At 1:59, they moved forward again. The program is shortening the delay. My watch remains correct. The recorder clock now shows 2:08. The wall clock shows 2:11. The laptop shows 2:13. The tape counter shows 2:15, although a tape counter should not display time of day. Room 202 is already at 2:16. The system is aligning every station with the transfer. I have moved to the narrow service space behind the room. The R202 wires are vibrating. I can hear trains in them. Not one train. Thousands. Some steam-powered, some electric, some moving with sounds I cannot identify. Everyone passes the same point. Everyone carries voices. Most are too faint to understand. A few say names. Some names are followed by dates centuries apart. The Fort Garry program is one local expression of a schedule much older and larger than the equipment that carries it. Human radio did not summon it. Human railways did not create it. We created structures that resembled it closely enough to become audible. Network connected to network. Timetable aligned with timetable. Station over station. We taught it our language, and it began routing us. 2:05 a.m. Room 202 opens. The door has opened again. I can see part of the room through the gap between the service wall and the wardrobe. The bed is occupied. The figure beneath the blanket is sitting up. I cannot see its face. I do not need to. It is speaking with my voice. It is reading this sentence at the same time I speak it. Number. There is a slight difference. It said the previous sentence before I did. The delay has reversed. I am no longer producing the account it copies. I am repeating the account it has already transmitted. I will test that. I will say a word that does not belong in this report. Northbound. The voice in room 202 said northbound first. I heard it through the wall. Then I chose the word, or believed I chose it. I will remain silent. The voice continued during the silence. It described me listening. It described the recorder light. It said I would resume because silence had become more frightening than obedience. It was correct. The program is no longer predicting speech. It is placing speech in front of me and allowing my mind to experience it as choice. That may be what transfer means. Not moving the body. Moving authorship. The copy becomes the operator. The original becomes an echo. The historical announcer may never have existed. Every version of that voice may have belonged to someone transferred earlier. Someone in 1929 heard a program from 2026. Someone in 2026 hears one from 2123. Each operator believes they are preserving the transmission. Each provides the voice used by the next. The system does not travel backward in time. It creates a chain of people who repeat what has already been received. A broadcast with no first speaker. A timetable with no first departure. That is the cosmic part of this event. Not a ghost, not a cursed room. A procedure that has always been running because every operator receives it from the operator who comes after. 2:10 a.m. Final departures. The orchestra has begun its last piece. The melody is no longer missing notes. It is gaining them. Each repetition contains another instrument. Some are not instruments I recognize. Metallic tones arrive before they are struck. Low vibrations continue after the room becomes silent. There are voices beneath the music now. Not conversation. Station identifications. Different places. Different dates. Hotels. Observatories. Relay rooms. Weather stations. Emergency desks. Each one reports an impossible signal. Each one believes it is the first. The network is much larger than Fort Garry. Room 202 is only one receiving platform. The other locations may use different numbers, frequencies, or legends, but the structure will be the same. A normal transmission, a small contradiction, a scientific explanation, a record that changes. A voice received before it speaks. An operator held at station. If you ever encounter that sequence, do not synchronize your recordings. Do not compare the signal across devices. Do not read its wording aloud. And if it assigns you a status, do not assume departure means death. Death is local. Departure is a change in the network. At 2:12, the announcer begins reading names. Margaret Bell, final departure. Edwin Clay, delayed. Miriam Voss, occupancy confirmed. That status is new. Room 202 is no longer empty. The figure has left the bed. I can hear it moving toward the service wall. The footsteps do not fall at walking speed. They follow the railway rhythm. 2 short, 1 long. 2 short, 1 long. The brass plate is bending outward. There are no hinges. Still, it is opening. Behind it, I can see no wiring, no masonry, no hotel room, only a narrow corridor with doors on both sides. Every door carries the number 202. The corridor bends upward beyond sight. Somewhere far along it, elevator bells are ringing. Not randomly, they are identifying stations. The announcer has reached my name, Daniel Hale. Received operator. The next entry is also mine, Daniel Hale. Cancelled body. The program pauses as if waiting for confirmation. I have one action left. This recording contains both versions, my living voice and the received voice. If the program requires one authoritative record, perhaps whoever hears this can preserve the contradiction. Do not isolate the cleanest voice. Do not remove the pauses. Do not repair the static. The imperfections may be the only evidence that two versions were present. If you clean this recording, you may complete the transfer. If you recreate my voice, you may give the program what it still lacks. The clocks show 2:16, all of them now. The field recorder, the wall clock, the laptop, the receiver dial, though it has no clock. Even the hotel elevator display. 2:16. The brass opening is wide enough for a person. The corridor beyond it is no longer empty. Someone stands at the nearest door. I can see only a silhouette. It is holding a microphone. The figure raises one hand, not waving, counting down. 5, 4, 3. The orchestra stops. 2. The carrier becomes clear. 1, 2:17 a.m. Transfer. This is Daniel Hale, CNRW Fort Garry service. Receiving platform 202. The time is 2:17 in the morning. The transfer has not completed as scheduled. I am still in the service space. The opening in the wall has closed. The figure is gone. Room 202 is empty. For several seconds, I believed the contradiction had worked. Then I checked the recorder. My voice is not registering. The level meter does not move when I speak. It responds only when I stop. During each pause, the meter rises. The recorder is capturing the received operator, not me. If you can hear the words I am speaking now, then you are not hearing the body in this room. You are hearing the copy. I do not know whether that makes me the original Daniel Hale or the cancelled one. I no longer know which version is narrating. The archive ledger contains only one entry now, Daniel Hale. Operator proceeding. The cancelled body line is gone. The room 202 booking system shows the room occupied. The guest name is Daniel Hale. The check-in date is July 23, 1929. The expected departure date is July 23, 2123. The program has placed me across the full route. That may be why I remain conscious. I am not being held at one station anymore. I am being carried through all of them. I can remember the hotel as it looked in 1929. I have never seen it in 1929. I remember the CNRW microphone in front of me. I remember musicians waiting in the room. I remember the heat from vacuum tubes and the smell of electrical insulation. I remember reading names from a page I did not understand. I remember reaching Daniel Hale and feeling, for 1 second, that the name belonged to me. Those memories are not mine, or they were not mine when this recording began. I can also remember the hotel in 2123. The windows are dark. Snow has entered the ballroom through broken glass. The city outside is silent, but the program continues. There is no audience. There may be no living operator. Still, my voice reads the schedule. If that future is only a possibility, the program is trying to preserve it. If it is real, then this broadcast has already survived everyone listening now. The announcer was never predicting the next death. It was ensuring the program reached its terminus. Every final departure removed a contradiction. Every delayed passenger created another chance for the route to change. Edwin Clay may have survived because he left before the system finished defining him. Miriam Voss may never have existed outside the booking record. Margaret Bell may have been created only because the program required its first proof. I cannot distinguish victims from evidence anymore. That is what the network does. It turns human lives into confirmation. The normal hotel sounds are returning. Ventilation, water pipes, a vehicle passing outside, the elevator descending. The program appears to be ending. The announcer has begun the sign-off. It thanks passengers for traveling with Canadian National Service. It states that the next program will originate from Fort Garry Hotel. It gives the date, July 23, 2123. It gives the wavelength, not 384.4 meters. It says the next transmission has no measurable wavelength because the distance between transmitter and receiver has been removed. It gives one final instruction. All receiving platforms are to remain occupied. I can hear a second carrier forming beneath this one. It is weaker, newer. It does not come from room 202. It comes from the device playing this recording. If you are hearing clean silence beneath my voice, lower the volume. Do not increase it. The program becomes clearer when you search for it. Do not compare this section with the beginning. Do not synchronize the two. The opening statement was recorded at 2:17 tomorrow morning. This statement is being recorded at 2:17 yesterday morning. If you align them, the times may reconcile. That will create another receiving platform. The elevator has returned. Its doors are open. The display shows no floor number now. It shows a date, tomorrow's date. Inside the elevator is the archive desk. The recorder is sitting on it. The tape has not yet been cataloged. A label lies beside the machine. The handwriting is mine. I know what it says before I see it. Recovered program. Fort Garry service. Operator copy. Do not play. The label has changed. It now says, playback confirmed. New station accepted. The room 202 telephone is ringing again. One ring, two, one long ring. I will not answer. The program does not require me to answer anymore. Somewhere, another receiver has already done it. The final carrier is moving away from the hotel, not through the city, through the record, through every copy of this account, through every system that preserves enough noise to contain a voice. The program is searching for a quiet room, a disconnected speaker, an unused track, a blank portion of tape, a listener waiting for something to emerge from the static. My name is Daniel Hale. I was hired to catalog a collection of audio equipment and documents recovered during maintenance work at the Fort Garry Hotel in Winnipeg. That sentence should sound familiar. It is no longer the beginning of my account. It is the station identification. The program is restarting. The date on the recorder has changed. The time is 2:17 tomorrow morning. This tape was cataloged at 2:17 tomorrow morning.